Cover 2 podcast live on OC Rock Radio. Before we start talking about sports like we usually do every single week, we just want to say that our thoughts are with everybody in Las Vegas after that terrible shooting that happened Sunday night right after we watched all the NFL and stuff like that. So we just want to say that our thoughts and prayers are with everybody in Las Vegas.
Yeah, no, of course. Just backing off what Nick said, our prayers, especially my prayers and thoughts, are with those in Las Vegas. I did know some people who were there. Unfortunately, everyone that I knew was able to get out safely and was not injured. But for those who were injured, 58 killed and over 500 injured, praying for you guys and hoping for a speedy recovery. And you just... you don't ever picture something like that happening as a concert, a music concert, something where people are all coming together, to enjoy music and to have a good time, and then something like this happens. So very unfortunate, and I can't even imagine what those people who were there are going through. But like we said, our prayers are with you guys, and hoping that you guys are doing well and can get through this.
Absolutely. No, I knew people that were there too, right in the middle of the crowd and stuff like that. So it's amazing that all of our friends got home safe and stuff like that. So just wanted to say this before the podcast started. We got to sports and started talking about stuff that really didn't matter on Sunday in the long thought. But we just wanted to give our thoughts and prayers. So let's move in. The NFL was Sunday. There's a couple crazy games on. This weekend. We're going to talk about the baseball playoffs as well later in the podcast and a little bit of college football, so stay tuned for those. We're going to start with the NFL. We're going to start with your Cowboys, Jared, who ended up losing to the Los Angeles Rams, led by Jared Goff.
You have to say it with a little smirk.
I don't know why I started laughing when I tried to say that, but whenever I think of Jared Goff even throwing the football, it kind of makes me laugh. So I have to give you a little bit of dig because they ended up losing to the Rams this Sunday. But so obviously I'll give you your thoughts first on that game.
Yeah, the first half, not to say that the Cowboys were blowing out the Rams, but the Cowboys had a 24-16 lead.
Yep.
And the Cowboys really scored on almost every possession in the first half. I believe the first possession ended in a field goal, but then the next three ended in touchdowns. So really the Cowboys were rolling offensively, at least. Defensively, they were a little sketchy. This defense for the last few years has always been bend but do not break. And not to say that that's a good thing, but it seems to work because this offense has been able to put up points on a consistent basis. And so going into the half, I'm like, okay, listen, we might give up, another touchdown or two, but the way this offense is going, it's not going to matter because this offense is going to be able to continue to move the ball, drive down the field, score touchdowns. The running game was you could tell not where it was from last year, but it kind of picked up where it left off in the previous week against the Cardinals, and it seemed to be rolling a little bit better. Dak Prescott was able to use play action off of that and get some easy connections to Des Bryant mostly. But really, you have to give a lot of credit to this LA Rams, and especially their defense in the second half. Wade Phillips, their defensive coordinator, really came out and made a lot of second half adjustments and forced the Cowboys into second and third and long situations. And what I mean by long is, 2nd and 6, 3rd and 8, 3rd and 12.
Exactly.
Not necessarily good percentages for making third down. So I really have to credit that defense for coming up big and really stopping the Cowboys, because in the second half, the Cowboys only scored 6 points, which is not good enough no matter who you're playing, not whether it's the Rams or the Patriots. You have to be able to score more than 6 points in a half. And because the Cowboys weren't able to do that, I think that's why they lost this game.
Well, yeah, and I think everyone's given I actually think you're giving the Cowboys defense a little less credit than they deserve. They did let them kick 7 field goals in the game.
True.
Too. So it wasn't like the Rams were going down the field and scoring a bunch of touchdowns. It was typical Rams football, lots of field goals. Greg Zuerlein was 7 for 7. You don't hear that a lot. But I do think that there is something to say about the Dallas defense. I think everyone overrated them after that Giants game. Now we've seen who the Giants are and what kind of team they are, and I think it's safe to say now that this Dallas Cowboys defense is a solid defense, but not a great defense, and it might affect them come later in the season. It's probably one of the reasons they're 2-2 as well.
It is, and listen, when you have a defense that is mediocre, the one thing that you cannot do is, and not to say that you have any control of it, but when injuries happen, it really kind of just deflates you. When you have a Denver Broncos defense, let's say for instance, and they lose a key player like Aqib Talib or something like that, because their defense is so great, they're able to compensate for that a little bit easier. As with the Cowboys, because their defense is middle of the pack at best, when you have a player like Sean Lee, who is the heart and soul of your defense, the middle linebacker, the guy that gets everyone lined up, and he's not playing, I think that really affects your team. Now, they did have Jalen Smith, who kind of replaced Sean Lee and took more snaps than he has in any game previous to Sunday. And he did a fairly good job. He did have 10 tackles in the game, which led the team. But you could tell that if you go back and watch the film, there were certain passing situations where he was definitely out of place. He got turned around a few times. There was that one, not screen pass, but that kind of dump off pass to Todd Gurley, where Jared Goff threw it to him, and Todd Gurley literally went right past both linebackers and easily scored a touchdown. So it was kind of a give and take with that. But hopefully Sean Lee can come back. The Cowboys do also get their defensive end David Irving back, who was suspended for the first 4 games. So they'll have him back, and that's good because this upcoming week the Cowboys are playing the Packers. So Mr. Aaron Rodgers is coming to town, and we all know what he can do, just like he did last year in the playoffs.
Yeah.
So hopefully the Cowboys can get those players back, and I think that will help this defense tremendously.
Absolutely, 100%. So let's move on to my Cardinals, who actually got a win this weekend in one of the strangest games I've ever seen. Talk about field goals, though. 9 field goals the entire game, and the Cardinals ended up scoring before the game was going to tie. I mean, if the Cardinals hadn't scored on their last play, they ended up throwing a winning touchdown to Larry Fitzgerald, who knocked the wind out of himself on the play. So if anybody thought he had a concussion, it was because he laid on the floor right after he scored the touchdown. And a lot of people thought he had a concussion. He just got the wind knocked out of him. That's what's coming from Bruce Arians. But that's not important. And so the Cardinals end up scoring a touchdown late in overtime. We really see this 10-minute overtime. You see how different it is in the 15-minute overtime. The Cardinals were running out of time on their first drive of the overtime. So they end up winning the game in a very weird, strange game. The Cardinals' defense remained pretty good for the entire season, but in the long run, this offense really needs to fix what's going on because they cannot score in the red zone if their life depends on it.
Yeah, no, this team, when I think about the Cardinals, I immediately think about their defense first and how not only aggressive they are, but you have Tyrann Mathieu, Patrick Peterson, Chandler Jones, Deion Buchanan. They've got some studs on this defense. And if this defense can hold teams to under 20 points, this offense has to be able to score.
And that's what I've been saying,
Listen, Carson Palmer and Larry Fitzgerald, they're a little long in the tooth. I get that. But they're still playmakers, and they can still go out there and produce. I understand that there's no David Johnson for a while, but it's not like this team doesn't have any running backs or this team doesn't have any talent. They should be able to go out and compete in every single game. Mm-hmm. And listen, you're playing a division opponent, so these teams are going to know each other a little bit better. That's why listen, the Cardinals on paper are easily better than the 49ers.
Absolutely.
But because you play them twice a year, you know the team, so it's a little bit different than playing a non-division opponent. So I understand why the game was close. But, and like I said, you have to give credit to Fitz and Carson Palmer for connecting right there at the very end.
Yeah.
But this game should not have been that close, in my opinion.
No, I agree, too. And I remember I was watching it with my cousin, and we were like, what is going on? When are we going to pull away from the 49ers? It was a lot like when they played the Colts, too. This offense just can't score in the red zone. They did actually, in a way, score a touchdown in the red zone that was called back by the referees that was completely a touchdown, and I'm still dumbfounded how it wasn't called a touchdown. They actually called it a touchdown on the field and changed it. They thought Andre Ellington dropped the ball. He didn't drop the ball. There was no reason for them to change it. But other than that, I mean, I'm not going to be settled for one touchdown a game. It just can't happen. It's one of the reasons they lost to the Cowboys. It's one of the reasons they've been close to they were so close to the Colts and 49ers. And it was one of the reasons that they lost to the Lions. They couldn't score in the fourth quarter. So the Cardinals really need to pick up their offense because the defense is playing outstanding, in my opinion, this year. And every single game, they're having to battle for themselves and almost score for the offense. So we'll move on to the Carolina Panthers New England Patriots game, which I'm going to call an upset right off the bat. I did not expect the Panthers to win this game. I thought New England would roll over them. The Panthers had looked terrible. Jared, is Cam Newton back?
I'm very hesitant in saying yes. I want to so badly, not only because I like Cam Newton as a football player, but also because he's on my fantasy team. So I have a little more.
There's
in
the bias,
this, right?
yeah.
That's the real reason. Listen, I going into this season, we saw the Patriots and acquisitions that they were able to get on their team, as well as the other guys that they were able to keep. And on paper, we were like, wow, this team just won the Super Bowl, and they're about to be better than they were a year ago.
Yeah.
So far, it's been the complete opposite.
Ooh.
Offensively, they've still been there. Obviously, the loss of Julian Edelman was huge. And defensively, this team is actually one of the worst in the league, stats-wise. So going into this game, I knew that they were going to have some problems because even last week going up against Deshaun Watson, they had trouble with quarterbacks who were able to run and athletic quarterbacks who can get out of the pocket. So I knew that they would have some trouble. I did not know that Cam Newton was going to go out, throw 3 touchdown passes, and run for 1. Listen, it was a very close game. The Patriots were able to come back in the fourth quarter and tie the game, but you have to give credit to Carolina for driving down the field and kicking that game-winning field goal. It was definitely an upset, something that I was not expecting, but I would definitely take those big-time fantasy points from Cam Newton. Thank you very much, sir. Keep it up.
No, it's just strange because we didn't expect Cam Newton to play that well, and he kind of returned to the Cam Newton we saw in 2015 when they went to the Super Bowl. It's refreshing to see. If you're an NFC fan like both of we are, we don't necessarily want the Panthers to be 3-1. We don't necessarily want them to play well, but it's always nice when we see a guy finally come out of a funk and play well. So it was nice to see Cam Newton play there. But you're right. This New England defense, there's something drastically wrong. I think it's due to the fact that these guys don't know this Patriots system yet. I've heard in the past, just from various players and stuff, that the Patriots defense or the Patriots playbook is very difficult to learn right away. And I think they had a lot of guys in key spots that haven't learned that playbook yet. No excuse. The Patriots should not be 2-2, but last time they were 2-2, they ended up winning the Super Bowl against Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah, no, I think you bring up a great point, and I also just kind of want to go off of that. Most teams kind of play one defense or the other.
Yes.
And what I mean by that is there's typically 2 defenses that teams play in today's NFL. It's either a 4-3 defense or a 3-4. Now, there's a million different variations of that.
Exactly,
and every week the schemes change. But for the most part, you typically stick with that particular package. The New England Patriots, because they're so versatile and because of the way that they draft and the types of players that they bring in, every week is something different. So they are what I like to call a hybrid defense, where they have a mix of a 3-4 team and a 4-3 team. So every single week, depending on the offensive opponent that they're playing, they're going to switch it up. And I think for players who haven't been in the system, like a Stephon Gilmore,
yes.
Just to mention, who's a cornerback, who's a really good corner, but he's gotten burned a couple times this year because he's been not in the right coverage. And I think that is because he's not necessarily used to this defense yet, and just all of the different types of schemes that this team runs. So what I think needs to happen is I think this team needs to kind of dummy it down in a sense, take it down a notch, not have such a diverse playbook, bring it back home a little bit, and only have a couple different coverages.
At least for the beginning of the season.
Because this team has a lot of talent, and if you just let these guys go out and play fast, they're going to do well. But when a player is thinking too much about what he has to do, that slows him down. And in the NFL, when you get slowed down, you're going to get burned just like this defense has all year.
No, 100%. And I think you're right about that. I think they do need to dumb it down, at least for these guys on defense, a little bit to begin the season, because I get that you're trying to enforce this Patriot system and it's worked for a long time. But if it's not working in the beginning of the season and guys aren't understanding it right away, you have to dumb it down a little bit for these guys. Now let's talk about the team that's first place in the AFC East. The Buffalo Bills ended up beating the Atlanta Falcons. Now there was some controversy in this game. There was a fumble that was called on Matt Ryan that I at least think was a pass. I thought it was an incomplete pass. They ended up being a touchdown, and the Bills ended up winning by 6. Nonetheless, though, there's something wrong with this Atlanta Falcons offense. We were just talking about the Patriots defense. There's something wrong with the offense this year, and Matt Ryan. For some reason, he hasn't played well to begin the season. He threw 2 interceptions in the game. The Bills defense is great, but you shouldn't be throwing interceptions if you're a guy like Matt Ryan that's been in the Super Bowl. there's something wrong with this team too. So now we're seeing both the Super Bowl teams not coming back to start this season very well.
Yeah, I think they were both, I don't want to say overhyped, but there was so much attention and pressure on both of these teams. So the fact that they're not, undefeated right now, I think it's like, oh my gosh, the sky's falling. These teams aren't as great as I think we just finished 4 games, all right? So 1 quarter. There's still 3 more quarters of the season left. So I think we need to pump the brakes a little bit. And also, I do want to mention Matt Ryan, for most of this game, was without his top 2 receivers.
That's true. Yeah,
Julio
I should have
Jones
mentioned that.
and Mohamed Sanu. So the fact that he was down to his 3rd, 4th, and 5th receivers, I think that obviously definitely didn't help them, right? And Matt Ryan was then forced to kind of make different types of decisions, because when you have Julio Jones on the field, you can just throw it up to the guy and you probably, he's more than likely going to catch it. And so when you're down to your other receivers who aren't as big and athletic, you can't just throw the ball up to them and hope that they can make a catch. So I think that definitely played into the Buffalo Bills' hand, and was a big reason why they were able to come out and get that win on the road. And yeah, no, for the to say that the Bills are in first place after week 4.
There was no way. There was no way anybody would say that.
That has to be probably the biggest surprise so far in this NFL.
It does, and look at it. And the Jets are tied with the New England Patriots too. Somehow, the Jets won it. We're not going to talk about that game, but it's just the fact that this AFC East has not turned out how we thought. When you look at the Bills, you know who they remind me of? They remind me of the Minnesota Twins. They traded a bunch of players before the season, gave up, essentially, we're going to rebuild. The Twins did that similar. They traded a lot of guys at the trade deadline. Twins ended up making the wild card game. The Buffalo Bills are now first place. They actually look like a pretty solid team. Do you think maybe that the Bills players took offense to that and said, you know what, we're going to play our asses off. We're going to go out and we're going to try to win as many games as we possibly can?
Well, of course. Listen, as a player, you always want to go out and win. Now, the front office and the owner might have a different idea as far as, tanking or doing something like that to rebuild.
Yes.
But if you're a player, listen, especially in the NFL, when a lot of these contracts aren't guaranteed, the NFL stands for not for long, which means you can be cut at any point. So I don't care if you're Tyrod Taylor, who's making millions of dollars, or if you're the 53rd man on the roster, you're going to go out there and try to win, because if you don't give your best effort, that's going to show up on film, and you're going to be fired the next week. So these players are going out and trying to do everything that they can to win, and they don't care about tanking or waiting for next year, because they might not be there next year. They're going to go out and do what they can to win, and so far they've been successful.
No, I agree, and it's just funny to see. Like we were saying, who would have thought the Bills would have been 3-1 and in first place in the AFC East?
Whoever made that bet in Vegas for the first 4 weeks probably made some money. Good for
you, exactly. Now let's talk about 2 non-game incidents. I'll start with Derek Carr, who's now injured and out for potentially a month and a half to 2 months. With it, what was his injury again? No, I didn't even see what his injury was.
I think it was some type of fracture in his back. It was very similar to what Tony Romo went through a couple years ago.
Interesting.
So Tony Romo only missed 1 game. Obviously, when he came back, he wasn't the same. He did have to get shot up before the game to go out and play. Mm-hmm. So we'll see. Obviously, backs are very, very tricky,
yes.
And it's one of those things to where even if you let it heal for a couple weeks or a month, it's more than likely not going to go away 100%. So he's probably going to be dealing with this injury for the rest of the season, and I think it comes down to his pain tolerance and his movement ability. Whether he can still be able to escape the pocket, because I think that is a part of his game. Obviously, he has a really strong arm, but he can run out of the pocket and use his legs to help his team. So if he's not able to do that, and if he's not able to deal with the pain, then we're more than likely not going to see Derek Carr for a long time.
I think this is going to affect the Raiders a lot. I mean, we saw what happened in the playoffs. They had no chance against the Texans.
Not at all.
No chance. So I think the Broncos are just going to take over this division, to be honest. Or actually the Chiefs and the Broncos.
Yeah, no, I like before when we were doing our NFL preview show a few weeks back before the season started, I had the Raiders winning this division.
I did too.
And now it's looking more and more like it's going to be the Chiefs and the Broncos who are going to duke it out. Especially if Derek Carr misses more than a couple games. If he misses more than 3 games, unfortunately, I think that's going to put the Raiders too far behind the way that the Broncos and the Chiefs have played.
No, I do too. I think they're in a lot of trouble. Now let's move on. We need the segment is almost over, so we'll talk about Antonio Brown's tirade on the field for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think there's something going on with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't think this is an Antonio Brown incident. I think this is a Pittsburgh Steelers incident. They had trouble communicating for the protests last week. Big Ben ended up calling out Mike Tomlin for something that happened in the game too, and now Antonio Brown going nuts on the field. I'd never seen this side of AB.
No, I haven't either. And listen, the Steelers did end up winning this game, so it's not like they lost.
And won handily, 26-9.
I think what this is showing is the fact. I think really, this is just the competitor side of Antonio Brown coming out and him wanting to make more plays for this team, because so far to begin the year, he hasn't necessarily been the receiver that most people have thought. And it's not because he's injured or anything like that. I think it's just because the Steelers offense has so many different weapons.
Yeah.
And so Antonio Brown just isn't going to get the same amount of targets as he has in the past. Obviously, you have Le'Veon Bell. You draft Juju Smith-Schuster, another solid wide receiver.
2 touchdowns for the USC.
You have Martavius Bryant and Antonio Brown. So, of course, Brown is going to get his looks. But because there's so many other weapons on this offense, I think, instead of getting 10 to 12 looks a game, now he's going to get like 6 to 8. And he has to be okay with that as long as this team is winning. Listen, I respect the fight and the passion that he has, but I think you have to be able to control that and harness it and say, hey, listen, we won the game. At the end of the day, that's all that matters.
It is, yeah.
Not to say that it's okay what he did, but if they would have lost, I think I could have understood this a little bit more. But the fact that they won, you have to say, listen, all right, I may have been open on a certain play, and Big Ben just didn't see me. But hey, we still got positive yardage on the play, and we still won the game, which at the end of the day is all that matters.
I know, and it's weird. They're 3-1.
Yeah.
What are they complaining about?
Yeah.
The one thing though is this team, when they've gone to the playoffs a lot, they haven't performed. And I think that's due because their conference, or actually their division, is not very good. The Bengals are clearly not that good this season. The Ravens are overhyped from earlier this season, and the Browns are the Browns.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of times they go into these, they have a good record and they go into the playoffs, but they're not, for some reason, they're not performing. I think it's due to they're not playing enough competition during the season. I just think these guys just need to relax. Like Aaron Rodgers said, RELAX. Relax. You guys are 3-1. You're gonna go to the playoffs because you're gonna win this division because everybody else is trash in your division. Just calm down. Everybody needs to play better. All right, we're gonna go to a break here. On the other side of this break, we're gonna talk college football. Big upset involving a team that we both follow, and one of our favorite coaches getting a big win this weekend. So we'll be right back on the Cover 2 podcast.
The biggest win in Troy football history. 37-year-old head coach Neil Brown out to shake hands with Ed Orgeron.
Yeah, that's not my defense. Coach Tucker does a tremendous job with that defense. They play hard for Coach Tucker. During halftime, I didn't need to go over and see the defensive players. They had it under control. They were doing the adjustments, doing a really nice job. So give credit where credit's due. The kids play hard. They bought into playing with toughness and practicing that way. I think we get the best look in the country from our scout team because, number one, Stetson Bennett's over there. We got 5 scholarship O-linemen over there. And we got good backs over there to practice against. So it's valuable, and it pays off in games like today.
Coach, heck of a win. What's it like there right now?
It's a good win. There's a lot of people. It's like Woodstock, except everybody's got their clothes on.
Cover 2 podcast. We are back here on the first Wednesday of October here in 2017. We're going to talk some college football. College football is now in week 6, but we want to talk about week 5. Couple good games. A lot of interesting games, a lot of interesting storylines coming out of it. We want to start with the game that was on Friday. We had a little Friday night football. Washington State and USC. Washington State ending up upsetting the Trojans. Good old Mike Leach, as you just heard that quote from him. If you're listening to the YouTube version, you heard him, his quote. He's always one of our favorite coaches to talk about because I think he's the mad scientist. I think he's a little nuts in the head. But they end up beating USC, and USC falls to 14. Washington State moves up to number 11. Jared, how legit do you think Washington State is after this win to USC or against USC?
I have to give this team a lot of credit for coming out and beating the previously number 5 ranked USC Trojans. They were playing at home. It was a night game. A lot of people always say that playing at Washington State at night is always trouble, whether it's the crowd noise or just something about playing there at night is just a little different. So also the fact that, both teams have one less day to prepare, I think that did play into Washington State's favor. But at the end of the day, you have to give credit to this offense. I mean, they were really able to move the ball at will against this USC defense. Now, this USC defense, in my opinion, is nowhere near, like an Alabama or a Georgia or anything like that. But I still don't think that they should have given up 340 yards to Falk or this Washington offensive attack. I think the biggest issue with this USC team is their offensive attack and what their lack thereof really in this game. They had a lot of trouble gaining yards against this Washington State defense, and I think they did a really good job of containing Sam Darnold, keeping him in the pocket and not letting him get out and throw. Now, the rushing game, that was really on point for USC, where they were able to rush for 163 yards. They got Ronald Jones the second back after he missed the previous week's game. So that two-headed tandem, him and Stephen Carr, was back in form, except for Stephen Carr only had 11 yards on 5 carries. So that's not really a good balance attack.
Definitely played into the loss.
Yeah, but no, like I said at the beginning, you have to give Mike Leach and this whole Washington State team, especially their offense, a lot of credit for coming out and doing what they did, because I don't think many people saw this coming out. I said before last week that it was going to be a close game. It wasn't going to be a blowout by USC, but I did not expect Washington State to come out and actually win the game.
No, yeah, we didn't talk too much college football last week, but if we would have, I would have predicted that Washington State was going to win. There was something in the air that felt like USC had kind of skated by their first 4 games. Obviously, their opponents weren't as good as people thought. Even the barely win to Texas, barely beating Western Michigan. Obviously, they beat Stanford, but Stanford's not the same team everyone thought they were at the beginning of the season. There was something wrong with this USC team, and it finally came to head. I do think you're right. This offensive play calling, or whatever they're doing on offense, just is not working. And this USC team, in my opinion, deserved to lose eventually this season, and they really need to pick it up, and they really need to stop relying so much on Sam Darnold, or they have no chance of getting him back into the Final Four.
No, they don't at all. I guess the only good thing that came out of this for USC is the fact that they won, fairly early in the season, that they lost fairly early in the season. You don't want to lose, the last 2 or 3 games of the season. If you lose towards the beginning or in the middle, you still have games to make up and prove that it was just a fluke and it's not going to continue. So I guess for USC now, they obviously still have division opponents to play. So for them, it's about coming out and proving that was just a fluke game, and it's not going to happen again. And really what they have to do now is come out and beat opponents somewhat handedly. If they come out and they're just kind of skating by like they have been for the first half of the season, I'm not so sure this team is going to get one of those top 4 playoff spots.
No.
They need to have convincing wins, show that they can win by double digits, 20, 25 points, and prove that they are a legitimate contender.
Well, a big problem for them is they don't play Washington this season.
No.
And with this loss, there are a lot of pretty good teams in the Pac-12 South. They are undefeated right now. And if they were to go by and end up, obviously if they were to beat USC would have no chance, but they're not. The only way they're going to play Washington is if they make that Pac-12 championship game and Washington gets in. I think if their schedule isn't difficult enough compared to some of these other teams for them to get in, if they don't end up beating a Washington team in the Pac-12 championship game. This loss was big for them. They needed to go by and skate by the Pac-12, and they didn't. And this is a big problem for them, and they're going to need to step it up, or you're right, they're not going to make that Final Four spot.
Yeah, just looking at their schedule really quickly, they do play actually right now they only have one other ranked opponent, and that's against
No, they got Utah and Notre Dame. Notre Dame's ranked too.
Oh, Notre Dame was ranked.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
I'm sorry about that. So 2 ranked opponents, but really looking at their schedule, it doesn't look that tough. So like I mentioned before, I think they're going to have to really blow out opponents in a sense.
When they haven't, yeah, you're right, because they haven't
wins.
blown out people yet this
Yeah,
season.
they do play Oregon State this week at home.
You need to kill Oregon State.
They need to come
USC,
out.
you need to kill Oregon State.
Yes, they do, to kind of get back in the good graces of the voting committee. And then Notre Dame is going to be one of the bigger games of the year. And then really, obviously, the last game of the season against UCLA. That's always a big matchup. But yeah, for this USC team, it's about coming out and kind of dominating Oregon State, showing that you can beat 2 back-to-back ranked opponents, and then really the rest of the season doesn't look that difficult. So, they're going to have to come out and really go undefeated and prove that they belong, because right now, just looking at their schedule, if they just skate by, I do not see the committee putting this team in the top 4.
I agree with that. So we'll move on to 2 teams in the top 4 right now. Clemson and Alabama. Clemson with a big win over number 12 Virginia Tech. Essentially that entire game, it looked like they were going to win. They made Virginia Tech look like a non-ranked opponent in that game. Alabama won by 9 touchdowns against Ole Miss, 66-3. I'm going to say it, Jared. Book them. Clemson and Alabama are going to the Final Four.
Really? Three years in a row?
Both these teams are so good. I'm already going to say it. Clemson's schedule isn't hard enough, so obviously I don't think they have any chance of losing another game this season. Florida State is not that good. They're going to beat Florida State because Florida State's...
No, Florida State's starting a freshman quarterback.
Well, yeah, but that's the problem. Virginia Tech clearly wasn't that good. Miami is good. I think that's their one test, but I don't really think they're not going to beat a Clemson team. So I think book them. Clemson's going to the Final Four, and same with Alabama. I mean, Alabama 2 weeks in a row. I think they've outscored their opponents. It's like 120-3 or something the last 2 games. I mean, it's ridiculous. I don't know if you agree with me on this, but I think you book them. But these 2 teams are in the Final Four already.
I do agree that they're in the Final Four. It's tough right now because Clemson playing with another young quarterback, and is he going to be able to keep this up all year long?
But he has shown he can.
Is the pressure going to start to build on him as the season goes along, as the games get bigger and bigger, and then if they do get into that playoff, it's obviously win or go home. And you don't have Deshaun Watson anymore, he's been through that, in years past. You're going with a guy who's inexperienced in that sense. So they do have a lot of talent around him to help him out. But I don't know if when those real lights come on, obviously they played a good Virginia Tech team, not a great Virginia Tech team this past week. But when those lights get brighter and brighter and more people are talking about this Clemson team, are they going to continue to dominate like they have in previous weeks?
Well, I think they can. Their defense is outstanding. Their running game is outstanding. Kelly Bryant, the quarterback you're talking about, has shown that he can play in the big games. Because this game, Clemson dominated this game most of the first half. Virginia Tech with 2 touchdowns at the end of the game to make the score close. But this was a 31-3 game in the fourth quarter at one point. This is not... This Clemson team is very good. They're lucky that they don't play a good opponent, which may end up moving them back in the Final Four a little bit. Because I think an Oklahoma or a Penn State or a Washington will beat opponents that mean more. So Clemson might not get that number 2 spot. But I think you got to put them in. They're clearly the best team in the ACC, and they're showing that they're one of the best teams in college football. So let's move on. So you mentioned a team earlier in this discussion about college football that I disagree is as good as you think they are.
Okay.
Georgia. This is the one opponent that I think, obviously, if Georgia were to get to the SEC Championship game, you'd have an Alabama-Georgia matchup. I think it's the one team that could put a little bit of doubt in Alabama's mind. But I feel like you almost think Georgia could beat an Alabama team.
Oh, they could hang in with them, of course.
See, I disagree with that.
Oh, yeah.
I think Georgia is overranked right now.
Okay.
They're number 5. I agree with you. The defense is great. I don't think that gets you enough. I've already said Michigan can't score. They really shouldn't be in the top 4. They're not right now. These teams that don't play good enough offense. I mean, look at Jake Fromm's stats in this game against Tennessee. 7 for 15, 84 yards. You really think that team's going to get to the Final Four? I don't think so. I think their schedule's been a hell of a lot easier. I think Tennessee sucks. I think Butch Jones' seat, I mean, we've already talked about his hot seat. It's very, very hot right now. Georgia, they've beaten good opponents like Notre Dame, but they barely beat Notre Dame. They should have lost to Notre Dame in that game. I think their schedule's been too easy for them to be ranked number 5. I think that the committee they're trying so hard to get an SEC team up in the rankings. I mean, we saw LSU and Mississippi State, who both lost very handily this weekend. We'll talk about them in a second. They ended up showing that they were not very good teams. They shouldn't be ranked anymore. So I do think that this Georgia schedule is too easy. I don't think they should be ranked number 5.
Who's Georgia's running back?
It's Nick Chubb.
Okay. Georgia's defense is also ranked top 5. What does it take to win a national championship?
Defense.
Thank you. What has Alabama done the last couple of years to win national championships?
had a good defense and a good offense.
Okay. I'll give it to you. Alabama's offense has been good, not great or spectacular. It's
been pretty damn good.
They have great players. I don't necessarily think their offense of scheme and what they do is great. I think because they have such great players, they don't need to be fancy and run all these trick plays and gadgets. They literally line up and say, we're going to run the ball down your throat, and they run the ball down your throat because of the players that they have. I think I think Georgia, in a sense, can do that as well. Now the stat that is a little bit alarming, obviously, is the 84 passing yards.
I'm saying, man.
That is not what you want to see.
You can't have a quarterback throwing for less than 100 yards.
You want to see 284 passing yards, not just 84.
Plus,
I get
they won 41-0. How does he only have 84 yards? I thought that was a mistake when I first looked at that.
Defensive touchdowns and running the ball.
Well, I get that. What I'm saying.
Listen, I'm telling you right now, Georgia and Alabama and the SEC championship, I'm not saying Georgia's going to win. It's going to come down to a field goal.
Georgia's going to lose the game this season.
Georgia's
not even going to get there.
You want to have another bet?
That's so far of a bet. Maybe we should bet.
Maybe we should. I'm telling you right now, Georgia.
We'll think of it. We'll come up with it at the end of the podcast. We'll think of a bet for the Georgia-Alabama game because we disagree about this.
I'm on the Bulldogs bandwagon right now.
Okay, wow. You're on the Bulldogs bandwagon. I would have never thought you would have said that.
I wouldn't have either. I don't know what the hell I'm doing right now, but I'm riding with them.
I'm going for this bet now. We're definitely betting now.
I'm riding with them. Let's go, Georgia. I want to see them upset. Yes, their defense is for real. Their head coach, Kirby Smart, came from Alabama as Alabama's defensive coordinator.
Yeah, you did want to mention that. You did want to mention that.
So he is definitely, defensively, he has his hands all over this team. If this offense can just get a little more from their passing attack, as you can see from running the ball, they rush for 294 yards. I understand that Tennessee is not a good team, but anytime you can rush for 294 yards, that's saying something. That means you're controlling the ball, you're controlling the clock, and you're keeping your defense, which is a top 5 defense, off the field. If you can do that if you can rush for 150 yards against an Alabama team, you have a chance to win.
Can you pull up the schedule, please?
Georgia's?
I'm going to show you that. Okay, so they beat Appalachian State.
Okay.
They barely beat Notre Dame. Like I said, they should have lost. They beat Mississippi State, who we've proven is not that good.
Okay.
And they've beaten Tennessee. They've also beaten Sam Houston State. That's an FCS team. And they've beaten the Tennessee team. Why does that make them number 5?
They're in the SEC.
Okay, so that goes to my point. They're overranked. I will say their defense is great. Their running game is great. They remind me a lot of Clemson. The problem is their quarterback sucks. He's not that good. And this team hasn't played anybody. They don't deserve to be in. This reminds me of USC. Okay, but USC at least played. Well, I mean, no, it does remind me of USC. I shouldn't say they played a good opponent. Stanford wasn't that good. They're not ranked. So I'm telling you, Georgia's going to end up losing the game this season, and we'll make this bet for sure.
Okay.
So let's talk about LSU and Mississippi State though, because I don't know if I said it last week. I definitely said it 2 weeks ago. I obviously thought LSU was overranked. I thought they shouldn't have been ranked. I thought Mississippi State was overranked at 24, and they ended up both getting killed. Well, not killed. LSU lost to Troy, which is in itself worse than getting killed. Because Troy, I didn't even know their nickname before this game. Okay? They ended up being the Troy Trojans. So the Troy Trojans were the best Trojans team of this weekend. I'm just going to say that. I mean, they were.
Shade.
Yeah,
Okay.
They were the only team to win, too.
Okay.
But LSU, what is going on? What's wrong with Ed Orgeron as a head coach? Because I thought he'd go in there great. And Coach O from USC, LSU has some problems. They've always had this quarterback problem for the last couple of years. Ever since Jamarcus Russell, they've essentially not been that good at quarterback. I think now it's showing. LSU, what is their record right now? They're 3-2. They're not ranked anymore. What do you think is wrong with? What do you think the biggest problem with LSU is right now?
You mentioned it. It's their offense, and I know I've said this numerous times on this podcast. I feel like I'm just repeating myself, but I also feel like I have to say it again. I don't understand how an LSU team and the SEC cannot recruit top elite
it's so
quarterbacks.
Bad. It's so bad.
I don't understand. What is it about LSU and some of these other SEC schools to where these top quarterbacks don't want to go there? Like, I get it. You're not going to go to a Mike Leach spread system where you're going to have 50 to 60 passing attempts a game and you're going to have all these passing touchdowns and all these yards and all this stuff. But if you go to these pro-style offenses, it's going to prepare you a little bit better for the next level, the professionals, or for the NFL, which is essentially where all these players want to go.
Exactly.
So if I'm a quarterback and I'm an elite quarterback, why not go to an LSU team where you're going to have talent around you and you're going to have more than likely a really solid defense? I don't get how this team does not get, like, listen, I'm not trying to say anything about their quarterbacks, but I don't really know any of their names. I'm literally having to look them up right now.
I didn't know his name either.
Danny Etling. I'm sorry, I don't know who this quarterback is.
Senior, too.
And he's a senior, which you would think he could come out and throw for more than 198 yards against Troy. It's really alarming. And listen, I know Ed Orgeron, it's his first year with the team. It's not his first year as a head coach. So I think his leash is a little bit shorter than most think. At LSU, you don't just come out and go 3-2 in your first year
and lose to Troy.
starting and lose to Troy and think that everything's going to be okay. So for those who think that Ed Orgeron is fine and he's safe for this year, I don't think so. When you have to replace Les Miles, who was with the school for however many years, almost 10, and won multiple SEC championships, went to a national championship against Alabama. And you have to replace that with this team right now. Now, listen, I think their defense is still good. Giving up 24 points to Troy is not my issue because offensively they should have scored 48.
Do you see the issue right here? 191 rushing yards from the Troy running back. What is that?
Wow.
I mean, this LSU team is falling apart. They were down 10-0 at half. They didn't score a single point in the first half against Troy, a team I didn't know the nickname to.
Wow.
This is bad. And yeah, I think you're right. Coach O is on a short leash now for sure after this because you just can't come out and lose like this.
No.
And it's not good. And you're right. How do you not recruit a quarterback at LSU? They've been literally one of the best teams in college football for like the last 15 years. I understand it. They haven't had one since Jamarcus Russell, and Jamarcus Russell was the fluke in the NFL. So he really wasn't even that good of a quarterback. So, yeah, there's something wrong with this LSU team. Now let's move to Mississippi State. Mississippi State killed LSU. They obviously were overranked too. There's not much to talk about this team because I think we're trying to say it. We're saying that this team was overrated. But I think it shows more about the SEC in that these teams, for some reason, aren't very good offensively. Tennessee, 0 points against an SEC team. Alabama's murdering SEC talent, not letting them score. Florida can't score, and they're not going to score anymore because their quarterback got hurt. So what's going on with SEC offenses? I mean, just these teams can't do much, and you'd think offensive players would want to go there. It's not like the weather is terrible. It may be hot some of these games and humid, but it's not like it's snowing in these games or anything like that. There's just a big problem with these SEC offenses. I don't understand how every single team can or can't recruit, because even Alabama hasn't had the biggest talent on offense.
No, they haven't. I think the issue with the SEC, and this has been for the last 10, 15 years, like you mentioned, is the fact that they don't get the top offensive talent, but a lot of their defenses are really good. So the games aren't going to be as high scoring. A lot of times you're not going to see the 50 to 48 type games. You're going to see more of an NFL type game. You're going to see a 24 to 21 game where it's going to be a defensive minded, game, and you're going to have to grind out points. Unfortunately, I think that's just how it is. A lot of the high talented, offensive players are going to the Pac-12 schools and the Big 12 schools where it's kind of more offensive minded. I think really what it comes down to in this SEC, what we're trying to say, at least what I'm trying to say, is the SEC is a little overrated. And other than Alabama and Georgia, I don't think there's really any other team in that league that can compete on a national scale or a playoff scale. So I think I agree with you. Both of these teams, Georgia and Alabama, are going to get in. But I don't think the committee can just sit back and say, oh, well, because an Auburn is in the SEC or because an LSU or a Mississippi State is in the SEC, we're going to give them credit. I don't think you can say that this year.
No, you can't.
Because these teams haven't proven that they can go out and beat other teams convincingly. They've either lost or they've skated by with wins, and I don't think you can just put that SEC mantra ahead anymore and give them the benefit of the doubt.
We have to go to break, so I'm going to say this really quickly. I'm going to bet that the SEC has the least amount of teams they have had in the final top 25 at the end of the season than they have in a long time. I'm guessing literally like 3 teams are going to be from the SEC ranked. But I think Florida, obviously with a miss or a hurt quarterback, they're not going to be ranked anymore. Tennessee's not good. Where Mississippi State is not good. LSU's not good. Auburn, I think, will end up being in it. They're a pretty good team, but they'll end up losing to Alabama. So, their record's not going to be that good. I think this is starting. College football is becoming one of these leagues where it's now a Big 12 Pac-12 league. Because the ACC isn't that good either. So it's weird that it's turned out like this, but these teams need to recruit offense, and it's a big problem. All right, we're going to go to break. On the other side of this break, though, one of our favorite games. Do you care? We'll be right back on the Cover 2 podcast.
Big pitch coming. 3-0 Twins, Yankees threatening. And the pitch rocked to right field. Tie game.
Even though Lonzo Ball went and played in college, even though Lonzo Ball did play high school basketball, he still has to change his jump shot. He's never really weight trained before. He doesn't really know how to play on-ball defense. And he has the perfect makeup to do it. He's very coachable. The coaches like him. He's a pleaser. If anything, he passes too much and tries to score too much.
Lonzo, yeah.
But LaMelo is not wired that way. And LeVar is no longer what LeVar was. LeVar was a cute, cuddly story a couple years ago.
Now he's a jerk.
Now he's a bigger-than-life reality show star that every decision is made based upon the brand, not what's best for the kid.
Super interesting news breaking just now. The NBA is majorly revamping its All-Star game. They're basically going to do the playground model with 2 player captains alternating to pick their teams. Forget the effect on the actual All-Star game. I mean, this is amazing in itself, and I hope we can figure out how to televise the entire draft. I want sound effects. I want some sort of Charlie Brown consolation prize for whoever gets picked last. The whole deal.
Back here on the Cover 2 podcast. And Jared, what time is it right now?
It's time for Do You Care?
Do you care? It's time for our favorite game on the podcast, a game where we ask each other questions and we see if we care or not. And a lot of times we do, and a lot of times we don't. So you never know what we're going to say, which is why you got to tune in. All right. So, Jared, I'll ask you the first question. Jared, do you care that the NBA All-Star Game format is changing?
I do care, and I think it's another way for the NBA to keep fans involved, and really, I think this is a ratings issue
100%.
as far as money is concerned. I actually like the idea. I think they're kind of taking a page out of the NFL, where in previous, going back into the history, this is the first time there's ever been a real big change with the All-Star Game. Previously, it's really been the East against the West. And that's it. The best players from the East play against the best players from the West. Now it is going to be the top 2 vote getters are going to be team captains, and they're going to choose their team. So, it could really come down to how well a guy knows a player, or, if LeBron James and Chris Paul and Dwayne Wade, he's probably going to get that whole team. He's going to want all of his boys on the same team. So that... to me, it's a little interesting. I do think the NFL plays it a little better, to where they actually have former Hall of Fame players come in and pick the team. So I guess it's a little more unbiased. So I think I like that a little more than having the actual players, current players, pick their teams.
Yes.
But it's still something new. It's something exciting that I think is going to draw more coverage. So it should be interesting to see, and we'll see if it works out. This year's All-Star Game is in Los Angeles, so that's obviously another big draw. But very interesting, and I'm excited to see what happens. Nick, do you care that the NHL season starts tomorrow?
I do care, man. I'm excited about this season. I think the Pittsburgh Penguins have another chance to win the title again. I mean, they have such a good roster, and they continue to stockpile talent that they've had for the last couple of years. Sidney Crosby, anytime you got the best player in the league, you got a chance. I also think there's some teams from the West that have a chance, especially our local teams. I think the Ducks are going to be good again. They keep failing in the playoffs, but I think they'll step it up this season and get to the Stanley Cup Finals. I think it's hard for them not to. I mean, they've been so damn close the last couple of years. I also think the Los Angeles Kings will be pretty good this season as well. And they'll come back from not making the playoffs. So I'm excited. The NHL season is always fun, and it's the beginning of that 4 sports on at the same time period. We're gonna have a lot to talk about on the podcast these next few days, these next few months, because we have so many sports going on. Jared, do you care that LeVar Ball is pulling LaMelo Ball out of high school to homeschool him in his last 2 years?
I wish I could say I didn't care, but I do care.
Oh, I know you care, yeah.
And it's not. This is another stunt for LeVar Ball to get his name out there, like he hasn't done it enough already. But the reports are that LeVar Ball has a bad relationship with a Chino Hills head coach, which is obviously where LaMelo Ball plays currently right now. And that is the main reason why he's pulling him out of high school. I hope that this is also what LaMelo wants, and I hope this isn't just to draw more attention to this family and to make LeVar Ball more talked about. If this is something that LaMelo has wanted to do and he wants to be homeschooled, then I guess I'm for it, you know. But if this kid is being forced to being taken out of school and away from his friends and away from his basketball team just because his dad wants to make a bigger name for himself and show that he can groom his kid without the help of high school coaches, then I think that's wrong. This family has already made a big name for themselves, and they've already made millions of dollars, and obviously Lonzo's already in the NBA, and more than likely LeVar Ball's other two sons, or LiAngelo and LaMelo, will eventually be in the NBA as well. But I just hope that this was done for the right reasons, which I can't sit here and confidently say that it was, because just from what we've already heard from LeVar Ball in the last year and a half, there's a good chance that this is just a publicity thing, and who knows, maybe the other thing too is LaMelo is only a junior, so who knows, maybe next year we could be talking about LaMelo going back to Chino Hills, you know, if this doesn't work out, which I would hope happens, because I know when I was a 15, 16-year-old kid, I didn't want to be at home. I mean, who wants to be at home? You want to be, not to say that, you know, school was the greatest thing ever, but you want to be around your friends.
His brothers are gone, too.
Right? And, you know, so I don't know. I think it's an interesting topic, but hopefully it works out for LaMelo and the best, because at the end, that's really all I think that matters. Nick, do you care that an NBA GM survey says that 93% of those GMs think the Golden State Warriors are going to repeat as champions?
No, I don't care, because I agree. I think I've been saying that the Warriors are going to win the finals. I'm going to say it right now. The Warriors are going to win the finals. They are too good. They have 4 superstar players that will win the title a lot for the next couple of years. Although there's teams that have been formed, like the Thunder and the the Thunder and the Rockets, that are very good teams with stars, I just don't think there's enough for me to say that those teams are going to beat this Warriors team. They're too good. And I agree with these GMs. Now, Jared, can you ask me another question? Because I know we want to ask that next one last.
Okay, fine. You get to be picky and get to
Sorry.
Nick, once again, do you care that Derek Jeter finally takes his seat in the Marlins front office?
I do care, because this is very interesting to me. You know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of Michael Jordan. This is a player that was a hero for a team, a hero for the New York Yankees. And how fitting is it that he goes to another team right when the Yankees are playing a wild card game, right? No, it's interesting, because Derek Jeter had his heart and soul was with the New York Yankees, and then he moves to the Miami Marlins. And he has no affiliation with New York Yankees, never has in a GM or management capacity. Now he's the freaking co-owner of the Miami Marlins. So very interesting. I do think he's going to change that Marlins franchise for the good, and that's why I care about this topic. The Marlins haven't been a very good team for the last couple of years. Pretty much ever since they went to the World Series in 2003, they've struggled in the playoffs to even get back to the playoffs. So I do think this will turn around. I do think this will create some storylines. You never know. This could be the beginning of the end of Giancarlo Stanton in Miami, too, with this new ownership coming in. So it's very interesting, and that's why I care about the topic. All right, last question, Jared. Do you care that the New York Yankees won the wild card game and are going to play the Cleveland Indians in the division series on Thursday?
Yes, I do. I think just like you did, I also predicted that the Yankees would win. It actually got off to a rocky start as Brian Dozier.
Luis Severino.
Yeah, Brian Dozier of the Minnesota Twins led off the game with a home run to deep center and literally took the air out of that Yankee Stadium crowd.
I know.
That stadium was rocking. After the game, Aaron Judge even came out and said, I've never seen that stadium like that before, and he was completely pumped that it was like that. Rosario also, I think he was the 4th or the 5th batter, hit another 2-run home run, and at the end of the top of the first, at the end, it was 3-0 Twins, and everyone was kind of going, oh boy.
Severino got pulled out of the game.
Yeah,
too.
Severino didn't even last the whole first inning. Pretty bad. But guess what, Yankees? don't worry, because Didi Gregorius came up and hit a 3-run home run to tie the game.
What a moment that was.
And the stadium went bonkers again. And then in the bottom of the second inning, Brett Gardner hit a solo shot to give the Yankees the lead. And from then on, the Yankees would not let up, as they would win the game 8-4. So big win for the Yankees. They obviously move on, and they are now playing the Cleveland Indians, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, Cleveland Indians, yes.
A very, very tough matchup for the Yankees, but it should be very, very fun to watch. So good for those Yankees. You have to give the Twins props for what they did, having a 100-loss season last year and then coming back and able to make the playoffs this year. So props to them, but good job to the Yankees for coming through and winning in this one-game wild card matchup.
No, absolutely. Great for the Yankees, and it's good for baseball because I thought the Yankees were the better team. They're really setting up this playoffs to be a good one. And guess what, Jared? We're going to talk about the playoffs in the very next segment. This is the end of Do You Care? We're going to be doing an entire MLB Playoffs postseason prediction. You're not going to want to miss this. We'll see if we and Jared agree on some of the topics as well. So we'll be right back on the Cover 2 podcast with an MLB postseason predictions.
One strike away. And for the 5th consecutive year, the Dodgers are the champions of the National League West. This year, a smooth flight, but a bumpy landing.
And the Cubs are headed to the postseason, it would appear, in just a moment. Fly ball to deep center field. Back goes Martin at the wall. He's there. He's got it. And the Cubs win the Central Division.
The 2-2 pitch. Swung out and missed. Hayes struck him out to end the game. The Indians win the series. They've won 24 of their last 25. They've won back-to-back Central Division titles. And just a great job by this ball club to continue to keep their eyes ahead, focus on each day.
Welcome back to the Cover 2 podcast. I'm Nick Nenad.
I'm Jared Smith.
And it's the final segment of the podcast, but probably the best segment of the podcast today because we're going to be doing a MLB postseason predictions segment right now. I was going to say show. It's going to sound real stupid. So before we want to talk about the playoffs, we want to talk about the regular season. Very interesting regular season with a lot of teams going on big streaks. You had the Chicago Cubs necessarily not having the best season after winning the World Series as they were so dominant last year. You had the Dodgers, who were dominant and then literally the worst team in the league for like 2 weeks. You had the Cleveland Indians break the record for best streak ever in a season. It was a crazy season. I want to get your thoughts on it first. What did you think about the MLB season this season?
Yeah, it was. I think going into the year...
that sounded so weird. The MLB season this season.
This season. It's okay.
Yeah.
I like to say seasons.
Could I screw up more on this segment already?
A little bit. I'm sure you will later. Little shot.
With that Georgia prediction? Is that what
Right. That's what happens.
Okay.
No, going into the year, I think it was a lot. I think we felt that it was a lot clearer as far as who were going to be the contenders versus the pretenders. I think we all could have agreed that the Cleveland Indians, the Chicago Cubs, the Dodgers were, in a sense, going to be the three top teams up there, correct? The Yankees were a little bit surprising with what they were able to pull off. And I think one of the biggest surprises of the year had to have been the Minnesota Twins. Mm-hmm. Like we mentioned in the Do You Care segment, the fact that they came back from a 100-win losing season, or I'm sorry, 100-win losing, really? Now I'm taking off of what you're saying. You're rubbing your bad juju on me now.
Oh, man.
The 100-loss season that the Minnesota Twins had last year, the fact that they were able to overcome that, and even during the trade deadline, somewhat trade players away, not necessarily thinking that they were going to be contenders, and they were still able to come out and get into the wild card. So I really have to give credit to this team for not backing down and playing really, really well and having a chance to get into the playoffs, even though the Yankees did beat them. So those are kind of just my kind of quick takes. What do you think?
Yeah, no, another interesting story was Arizona. Arizona wasn't very good last year. That had to do with more injuries than it did the team being bad. But Arizona, another big surprise. They're one of the best teams in baseball, and they're having to play in the wild card game tonight. We're doing the podcast on Wednesday. You might already know the result of the game if you're listening on YouTube. So Arizona was surprising too. Colorado, who's in that wild card game, not as surprising. I was kind of waiting for them to be pretty good eventually this season. or eventually one of these seasons to make the playoffs again. So that's not as surprising as Arizona, but still a very interesting season with a lot of surprises. Milwaukee Brewers were very good for this season for a long time. Nobody would have expected that either. So it's been a fun season. Now let's move on. So we were talking about Arizona and Colorado. The wild card game is tonight, Wednesday. Who do you think is going to win, Jared?
I'm going with the Diamondbacks.
Okay.
And the reason why I am is for really one reason, and it's Zach Greinke. I do think that the Diamondbacks have a good offense. I think Colorado's offense is a little better. But Zach Greinke at home this year is 13-1 with a 2.87 ERA. So with those stats alone, I understand that the last couple weeks of the season he hasn't necessarily been at his best. But overall, throughout the year, I think he's been their number one ace. And so I'm going to ride with him and say that he's going to give the Diamondbacks at least a good solid 6 to 7 innings to work with. And I think Arizona's going to pull it out, especially being at home.
Interesting. I agree with you on a lot of that. One thing I do disagree on is that Zach Greinke is going to pitch well in this game. I think Colorado is going to end up winning this game because Zach Greinke has had 2 bad starts in a row. I don't know the exact stats of what he's done, but I believe he's given up like 10 runs his last 2 games. Not 10 runs in each, but 10 runs in the last 2 games separately. I think Colorado's offense is going to be too much for Arizona. Arizona is probably the second best stadium to hit home runs in because they're the second highest stadium in the league. Colorado being the top where home runs go out quick. I think Colorado's going to get a big lead quick. I think Greinke is going to not survive in this game as long as people think he is, a lot like Luis Severino and Irvin Santana yesterday in the wild card game. In the AL wildcard game. And I think Colorado pulls it out. Colorado's going to be a nightmare matchup if they have to play the Dodgers. And so is Arizona. No matter who wins this game, Dodgers are going to be in trouble in that first series. So let's move to that one. We both have different opponents. Do we both believe the Dodgers will end up pulling out that first series?
It's a very tough question, and I really want to say that the Dodgers will.
Yeah.
But I don't trust Kershaw. And listen, he's the ace. He's the 100 or 200, whatever you want to call him. He's the $1 million man, right? Yeah. What has he done in the playoffs to convince anyone that he can lead this team? To me, it's nothing. He has been the best.
Wow, that's harsh.
He's been the best pitcher in Major League Baseball during the regular season for the last 4 or 5 years?
Probably even longer than that,
right? In the playoffs, I'm sorry, but he's stunk it up. He has not
pitched well. He pitched okay last season's playoffs.
Yes, not good enough, in my opinion. The Diamondbacks this year, I believe they went 11-8 against the Dodgers. So I'm not saying obviously that's going to translate because listen, in the postseason it's 0-0 and nothing matters.
Some of those came in the Dodgers losing streak as well.
True. Yes. I'm going to give it to the Dodgers, but it's going to go. It's a 7-game series.
5-game series.
5-game series. I'm going to give it to the Dodgers, but I am nowhere, if you can tell my voice, nowhere near confident.
No, you don't sound confident.
I'm really only saying that for the hometown feel aspect. I really think Arizona could give them a tough matchup, and the fact that they have Robbie Ray as their second pitcher in the rotation behind Zach Greinke. I think that combination, the righty-lefty combination, is a big factor, and I think can slow the Dodgers' offense down. But I'm going to give it to the Dodgers just because of their offensive threats. And because Greinke and Ray would more than likely only be able to pitch 1 game each.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a very interesting series. I think if you had to watch one series, if you could only watch one, I'd say watch this one. If it's Colorado or Arizona, it's not going to matter. This series is going to be great. It's NL West opponents. It's kind of the teams from the West are moving on. So it reminds me a lot of the hockey playoffs where the teams play out of their divisions first and then they move on to the conference finals. This is going to be interesting. I kind of echo what you say, that I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know which Kershaw is going to show up. I don't know if the hitters will show up. I feel like the hitting is so much better than last year, so I'm going to give the Dodgers the benefit of the doubt. I do think they're going to win this series, but I wouldn't be surprised if this goes to 5 like it did last year, and I wouldn't be surprised entirely if the Dodgers end up losing to one of these teams too. It's hard for me to say that because I'm a big fan of the Dodgers, but they got to show me that they can compete in the playoffs. I'm looking at that first game. Let's say the Dodgers go out and kill Arizona or Colorado, I'm giving them the series 100%. If they don't, it's going to be close. And I think it has to do with Kershaw. You're right. He's got to pitch well in that first game. And the Dodgers hitting, which notoriously has not been very good in the playoffs as well, needs to step it up for sure. All right, let's move on to one of the AL matchups, Boston and Houston. I think this is a good one. Although I do think Boston has faltered a little bit to end the season. I mean, they almost lost the division to the Yankees. They barely won it. I think they won it second last day of the season. But I think Houston is the clear better team here, and I think Houston's gonna grab this series. In a 5-game series, it's going to be hard for you to beat Justin Verlander, Dallas Keuchel, and Lance McCullers Jr. Those are 3 great pitchers. I'm going to give it to Houston. I don't think the Boston pitching has been nearly what it was earlier this season. I gave it to Houston. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a sweep.
Yeah, no, you kind of took the words right out of my mouth. And for Houston, you can't say it's just because of their pitching or just because of their hitting. They are so well balanced that it's both. And the fact that they did add Justin Verlander towards the end of the year, another ace, another arm that can give you 7 solid innings along with Dallas Keuchel. Yeah, no, listen, Boston is a good team, and Chris Sale, has been in the MVP Cy Young race all year long.
He's had a bad September, though.
He has had a bad September, but he's obviously clearly the number 1 ace, and it's going to be a great game 1 matchup between those two. But yes, overall, I think Houston is the much better team, and the fact that they do have home field advantage, I'm definitely giving this series to Houston. I think Boston can scratch out 1 game, but I think Houston is more or less going to win this series pretty handedly.
Justin Verlander has been amazing since he joined the Houston Astros as well. He's a completely different pitcher than he was on Detroit. His ERA is lowered. It's going to be a good. It's not going to be one of the better series, but I do think if you want to watch good pitching matchups, watch that one because you're going to get Chris Sale and Justin Verlander in the first game.
Oh yeah,
don't get much better than that, to be honest. So let's move on to the other NL series, the Chicago Cubs and Washington Nationals. This is another barn burner of a series. I mean, the Nationals are one of the best teams in baseball. They have one of the best lineups in baseball. They have a good starting rotation. And the Chicago Cubs, we know what they did last year. Amazing. They ended up winning the World Series. They ended up winning 100 games. This is an underrated playoff matchup because the Cubs' record isn't that good. But this is a hard one for me to pick because I don't know what Cubs team is going to show up in these playoffs. We're talking about the Dodgers. We don't know if their team is going to be the same. I think this Cubs team could grab this series. I think they could return to what they were in the playoffs last year. They lost some key guys. They lost guys like Dexter Fowler. Their pitching hasn't been as good. Jake Arrieta, from what I've heard, is hurt, and now he's not pitching in the earlier games in this series. But I do think they have that tenacity. They did it last year. I mean, they freaking broke a 106-year streak. It's going to be tough. This is a hard series for me to pick. But I'm going to go for the upset. I'm going to go Chicago Cubs win this series.
Oh, once again, are you reading my mind? I am also going with the Cubs, and I think it's for a couple reasons. One, I think it's momentum. The fact that they did win last year. And listen, Joe Madden is going to have this team loose.
Oh, yeah.
He's going to have them
ready to go. He's going to back Chris Bryant first, one game. Yeah.
Listen, this team is now somewhat experienced after going through what they went through last year. And really why I give this edge to the Cubs is because of what Washington is potentially lacking. The fact that Scherzer is dealing with a hamstring injury right now, point. And he's more likely going to play, but is he going to be 100%? No, I don't think so. And the fact that Bryce Harper is coming back, even though he hasn't played in how long?
I think he played like a couple of the games at the end of the season, but it's not. It's not enough.
Not enough at all. So I think the combination of Scherzer being injured and Bryce Harper not really having as many at-bats to get prepared for the playoffs, I think it's the lack of depth that Washington is going to be putting out, which is why I give the edge to Chicago. Not to say that Chicago doesn't have the talent, because they definitely do, but because I think Washington just doesn't necessarily have their players at 100%.
Their best players.
Their best players at 100%, which is why I'm going to give it to Chicago.
Yeah, it sucks for Washington, too, because you have such a great season. People have been saying, oh, well, they're potentially better than Dodgers in the NL when the Dodgers were good. And now to have this, Bryce Harper got injured, hurt his knee in a very bad-looking accident at first base, wet base, twisted his knee up. And then Max Scherzer, in the last game of the season, injures his hamstring. It sucks for these fans, and I think those are the reasons we're picking Chicago. It's just it's hard to go against the team that won the World Series last year with a lot of that same talent. All right, so let's move back to the AL. New York and Cleveland, as we just previously talked about. And do you care that the Yankees won the wild card game? This is an underrated series as well. I'll tell you this: as good as Cleveland's been, I would not be surprised if the Yankees bring this to 5 5 games and even win the series.
Really?
Yeah. Although Yankees pitching isn't nearly as good as Cleveland's pitching, and I think Cleveland's pitching is probably the best in baseball with some of the guys you have. Corey Kluber's been amazing. Danny Salazar has improved from last year. They're finally healthy. Carlos Carrasco, another guy that's healthy after last season. Trevor Bauer has turned into the Trevor Bauer that was drafted in the first round back in, I believe it was 2011. I mean, these guys, not 2011, that's too late. Whenever they got drafted, it doesn't matter. But this team has good pitching, but I wouldn't be surprised. This Yankee team just has some. After last night, you look at them go down 3-0 in the first inning and hit a 3-run home run. First inning, not even 2 outs, 1 out in the inning, and they hit a 3-run home run to tie the game. That's the kind of tenacity I like in a team. I wouldn't be surprised if the Yankees win the series, but I'm going to pick Cleveland.
Okay, I'm picking Cleveland as well, and I'm picking Cleveland because of their balance and their depth, more or less just like with the Houston Astros. I think Cleveland is just going to have too much in the end. I do give a lot of credit to the Yankees, and especially their bullpen with Chapman and Robertson and Green coming in and kind of saving the night for that Yankees team. I'm not too sure that anyone other than Aaron Judge can give this Yankees team the type of consistent power that they might need to beat some of these other teams like the Indians or the Astros in a 5 or 7 game series. I don't see Brett Gardner and Didi Gregorius hitting home runs or bringing in the type of run support like they did in last night's game. So because of that, I'm going to give it to this Indians team, and just the fact that they've been one of the best teams consistently throughout the regular season. When you have the pitching that they have with Carlos Carrasco and Bauer and Kluber, those guys right now, those three-headed monster, I think that that defense and that pitching is going to bring this Cleveland Indians team far in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the best division series matchups I've seen as far as all 4 of them. I think essentially every single team in this playoffs could potentially get to the World Series, which is amazing. Now let's turn it. Now we're not going to, because I think we picked some different teams, so we're not going to go and pick the actual NLCS matchups and pick them up. Who do you think from the AL gets to the World Series?
I'm going with the Indians. I'm going to go with the Cleveland Indians, and like I just mentioned, because of their depth, I think it's going to be. I know we didn't, but I'm going to say Cleveland and Houston for a chance to go to the World Series.
Yeah.
I'm going to give it to Cleveland. Partly because I want to see them get there, almost like last year with the Cubs, because their 108 year streak of not making it. I forget what Cleveland's streak is as far as not winning the World Series. Do you know?
It's the longest in baseball. I don't know what it is. I know. Funny enough, the Arizona Cardinals have the longest streak as far as a franchise not getting.
You would know that.
Yeah. Not winning a championship. Obviously, both of them have been.
Yes.
Yeah, but it's something like 50-something years, I think, since.
So
they won.
My pick is partly because I'm just rooting for them to get there, but also because of the talent that this team has. I think this team can fend off the Yankees, and then it's going to be a heck of a series against Houston if that does turn out to be the case. But I'm going to give the slight edge to Cleveland in the AL.
Yeah, I'm going to give it to Cleveland too. Even though I said the Yankees might beat them, I do think they have the deepest roster of players besides maybe the Dodgers, at least in the AL. We are talking about the AL, so I don't know why I mentioned the Dodgers. But Cleveland, their starting pitching is just too good. And I think the Houston team, they're a very good team. I just don't think you're going to really stop these Cleveland pitchers. I don't think the Houston offense has enough, although they're very good. I don't think they have enough to stop the bullpen from Cleveland, the starters from Cleveland. So I think pitching is going to carry Cleveland. I agree with you. I think they go to the World Series. Now let's move over to the NL. I'll start with this one. I do think if the Dodgers get past one of these wildcard teams, I actually think their matchup will be easier in the championship series. You don't hear that a lot, but I do think it will. So I'm going to say that the Los Angeles Dodgers get to the World Series. I think there's been too much this year for them. If they actually can advance to a next round, they're that close to the World Series to not get there. The hitting has been great. You have Cody Bellinger. There's a lot of new pieces. Even the bench is pretty good. But I'm going to say it. The Dodgers, if they can get past that first round series, which we were both skeptical about, I think they get to the World Series.
I'm gonna go with the rematch. I'm giving it to the Cubs.
Okay.
Again. I am, and like I said, I want to give it to the Dodgers. I don't trust that in the playoffs they're pitching, especially with Kershaw. I haven't seen it. I need to see Kershaw perform before I can really be more confident and saying that this Dodgers team can make a deep run in the playoffs. Like I said, he's an outstanding pitcher, and in the regular season, he's the man. But I don't think he's shown in the postseason that he can carry and lead this team and be the ace and potentially have to play on 3 or 4 days rest. So because of that factor, mainly, I'm going to give it to the Cubs again. And listen, you've got Lester. I mean, you can really go all over the place with this team. You got Chris Bryant, Rizzo, Schwarber. This team is loaded. And like I said, I think they're still riding that high from last year of winning again, saying, hey, guys, we can do this again. Joe Maddon's going to have this team loose, like I said. They're going to go out and just play their game, and they're not going to be uptight or worried about trying to repeat. You know what I mean? They already got the monkey off their back.
Oh, 100%, yeah.
Back. So now it's just going out, hey, let's do it again. And I would love to see a rematch again from these two teams, because I think it would go 7 again.
And like we're saying, I mean, I don't think it matters.
Yeah, no, there's no right or wrong.
It really
answer.
doesn't matter who's in the World Series this year. It's going to be a good matchup.
Yeah.
I think the one team that could have knocked that off maybe was the Minnesota Twins. If they were in the playoffs, you would have said, okay, I really don't think they're going to make the World Series. I do think every single team in this playoffs this year could make the World Series. So we'll move on to the World Series now. We're talking about it. I'll start with mine. I think it doesn't matter what NL team gets in. I think the Cleveland Indians are winning the World Series this year. I think they redeemed themselves, especially if you play a team like the Cubs, where they were 1 inning away, maybe no rain delay, and they win the World Series last year. It reminded me a lot of the Super Bowl. In fact, where I do almost crown the Falcons the Super Bowl champion, even though they ended up blowing it. I almost crowned the Cleveland Indians the World Series champion from last year. I think they'll redeem themselves. They have too good a pitching, like I'm saying. I think they win the World Series no matter who they play.
Yeah, I kind of have to agree with you. And like I said, not that I don't like the Cubs or think that they can't win it, because they easily can, but just something about the Indians, the way that their season has gone with their 20 game winning streak.
I think it was like 23 or 24.
23, I'm sorry. Just the longest winning streak in MLB history. And the fact that their lineup from top to bottom is just stacked. For those reasons, I'm gonna give it to Cleveland as well.
Yeah, no.
Finally get that monkey off their back.
Exactly. It's going to be a good playoffs. Obviously, if you're listening right now, you might know some of these matchups and who's won some games, stuff like that. Doesn't matter. We both think the Cleveland Indians are going to win the World Series this year. So let's go to our final thoughts. We stupidly didn't make the bet while we're on any of the breaks. So you know what we'll do? We'll make the bet next week. We'll do the bet next week. My final thought on the day is just I'm excited for these playoffs, for the baseball playoffs. I'm going to jump on the last segment we were doing. Like I've been saying, I can't stress enough, every team can win the World Series this year. You have to watch these games. They're going to be good games. Every matchup is good. No matter what we really said in this last segment, every matchup is good. And I'm excited about the baseball playoffs. It's one of those times where all 4 sports are going on. It's a really good time, and the baseball playoffs are better than ever.
Yeah, no, you mentioned my final thought. It's that right now we have all 4 major sports going on. If you're a sports fan right now, this has to be the best time of the year.
Absolutely.
You have the NFL season in going into week 5. You have college football going into week 6. You have the MLB playoffs that have already gone underway. You have the NHL season, which starts tomorrow, and you have the NBA in preseason. So you have almost any type of sport that you want to watch right now. Go on ESPN or whatever sports channel you watch, and there's going to be some type of sports on right now. It's not like there's just only baseball and we're kind of in the dog days of summer.
I know.
We have all 4 sports going on right now, and for me, I mean, I'm not a huge couch potato, but you might find me, on weeknights sitting on the couch flipping that remote back and forth, just because there's so much to watch in sports right now.
Absolutely. I mean, any bar you go to, you're going to be able to watch anything. There's not going to be those nights where there's nothing on TV.
Not at all.
Until, I don't know, like what, January, February? It's not a lot. So it's going to be really fun. That is the end of the podcast. As you can hear the music playing. I'm Nick Neenan.
I'm Jared Smith.
And we'll see you next week. Hopefully the playoffs are very good in baseball.